everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at the REC for the Crown Commercial Services Permanent Recruitment webinar. Before we proceed with the presentations from Crown Commercial Service, we just want to check that our systems are up and running and you can all hear us. So could you kindly type in the boxes whether or not you can hear us before we proceed further? Great. I can see great responses here. A lot of you can hear us. So everything is up and running and hopefully should be for the next hour. So I'm Bumi Adefuli. I'm a solicitor here at the REC, and welcome to the Crown Commercial Service Permanent Recruitment webinar. I'm going to introduce to you Joe Smith and Clemmy Smith from Crown Commercial Service, who will be taking you through the slides very shortly. But just for your information, we note that quite a number of people are registered for this webinar this afternoon. And we want to let you know that it's not in relation to the education framework, nor the public sector resourcing contingent labour framework. It's about permanent recruitment only. So I'm going to hand you over now to Clemmy, who's going to start off with the webinar.
Excellent, thank you, Bumi. Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Clemmy Smith. Thank you so much to all those who've joined. We seem to have a really good number of attendees today, so that's excellent news from our perspective. We're really excited about this permanent recruitment project that we're leading at CCS. And we hope to use this opportunity to provide you with some insights into our thinking, as well as the next steps that we will be taking on this project. Our agenda, if I move on to the first slide, our agenda for this session is to start with some introductions to the CCS team and our objectives for this webinar. We will then talk you through where we are now, the current landscape for permanent recruitment in central government and wider public sector as we see it. And then that will be followed by an overview of the proposed new model for permanent recruitment, as well as some insights into what CCS is trying to achieve with the new agreement. Finally, there'll be a chance to get some feedback from you guys who are on the webinar, and your input via some polling questions, and also the questions that we receive from you during the course of the presentation via the chat function. I just want to kind of mention here that we won't be answering questions during the course of the presentation. Please, I do want to encourage you all to send in questions, comments as you go along. If you've got thoughts on things we're saying or showing, do kind of use that chat function to make comments and questions. We won't be answering as we go through the presentation. We'll deliver that kind of in its entirety. But at the end of the session, we should have time to answer a selection of questions. And what we will also do is we will take questions away with us after today, and we will give some written responses following the session. So that's just how it's going to run today. So if I move on to the slide that you should now be able to see, which sets out our CCS permanent recruitment team, all of our lovely smiling faces on there. So to introduce the CCS team that will be managing the permanent recruitment programme, presenting on the webinar today, as Bumi mentioned, you've got myself, Clemmy Smith. I'm Senior Category Lead for Workforce at CCS, and part of my remit I have permanent recruitment. And we also have Joe Smith. Joe, do you want to just say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Joe Smith and I'm the Category Lead, solely focusing on the delivery of the permanent recruitment strategy.
Other important names and faces that you can see on the slide, though not on the webinar today, are Maggie Tong, who's the Senior Commercial Specialist for Workforce. She heads up the team at CCS, covering both permanent and contingent labour. We also have in our team Lauren Green, Category Services Specialist, and Shakia Manager, who's our Category Specialist. The next slide will go through some of our objectives for this session. We really wanted to run this webinar with the REC for a number of reasons, but first and foremost because we see this as a really good opportunity for us to engage with the supply market at an early stage in our project. It's an opportunity to share our thinking, but also to gather input from you as the market, and hopefully should provide an opportunity for an initial temperature check on our strategy for permanent recruitment. Afterwards, we are going to be engaging with suppliers and customers in further sessions, and we will explain some more about that at the end of the presentation. So just to go through really the three key objectives as set out on the slide. Firstly, to provide you as suppliers with some feedback on where we are with our programme and our progress to date. I should highlight here as well that when we talk about permanent recruitment, we are referring to third-party services to support the recruitment of permanent and fixed-term workers into government and the wider public sector, and that's across a range of role types. So administrative through to DDAT, HR, commercial, etc. And there'll be more on that to come, later on in the presentation. Number two, we want to share our current thinking on the as-is landscape in central government and the wider public sector, the proposed new model for a pan-government agreement, and our timeframes for the next steps in the process. And thirdly, we want to give you, as I've already mentioned, the opportunity to feed back on the proposed new model and provide some input to help us shape the agreement in a way that will meet both customer needs, but also get the very best from the supply market. It's really important for us to involve you in this so that we can make sure this, gets the best out of the supply market for our customers. On to the next slide. So a question that you may be asking yourselves right now, why does CCS want to create a permanent recruitment agreement for government and the wider public sector? Obviously, this has been something that we've been working on for a while within CCS. Lots of discussions have been going on with certainly with our customers to date about this area, and I think it's worth just kind of going through some of the kind of key reasons that have got us to this point in terms of doing this agreement. First of all, and perhaps quite importantly, there's no existing CCS agreement for permanent recruitment. There are, as some of you will be aware, some legacy HMRC agreements which are used by some parts of government, but they're ageing agreements. One of them is about to expire, and they have some limitations in their scope. The CCS workforce team in its entirety is obviously looking at commercial strategies across the workforce piece, the resourcing piece for government, and as you can imagine, permanent recruitment is really a very critical part of that for us. Next, there's a strong demand for a route to market for permanent recruitment services across government and beyond. We get regular requests for support and advice from departments, agencies and wider public sector bodies. And as you'd imagine, we've already undertaken a range of engagement exercises with our customers. So that includes both commercial and HR colleagues across government. And this has been very much highlighted as an area where there is a need for a solution. Current approaches to recruitment can be fragmented and inconsistent across government, even within a single department in some cases. And I suspect a lot of you on the line may have experience of that. So we really see this as an opportunity to achieve over a period of time a more coordinated approach, more joined up practices and processes across public sector for permanent recruitment. Stakeholders are communicating growing challenges in recruiting to specialist roles, particularly digital DDAT roles, and there is a real need for innovative solutions from highly experienced suppliers to support this activity, and we want to be able to support that better. And last of all, though, I mean, there are probably a lot more reasons, but these are the kind of top ones. There is currently limited visibility on data on permanent recruitment services across government. And that includes where third parties are being engaged, what they're doing for government, the volumes, the spend, and all of those things. So this is making it quite difficult for us to put strategic solutions in place to improve the way we do things. And we really want to tackle that. And we see this commercial solution as a step towards doing that. So I will now, we're moving on to the current landscape section. I will now pass over to Jo Smith, who will talk to you a bit more about the current landscape and stakeholder feedback.
Thank you, Clemmy. So the next slide that we're going to look at kind of sets the scene on the current permanent recruitment landscape across the public sector. So as Clemmy's just touched on, really, the visibility on data to identify public sector spend and volumes with agencies supporting the recruitment is really limited. Something that we actually factually do know is that the number of new permanent entrants to the civil service in 2015-16 was around 30,000. However, we don't have any transparency beyond that as to understand the volume of these roles that were supported by recruitment agencies. From the stakeholder engagement undertaken so far, we also understand that the existing contractual agreements are dated and due to expire, and that the nature of these agreements and the suppliers contracted with aren't necessarily all of those best placed out there to deliver increasing demand for specialist skill sets, which the event of Brexit and the demands within the DDAC and commercial functions across government is requiring. Therefore, these factors are presenting the opportunity to develop a new agreement, which will hopefully connect the departments and wider public sector to the required fixed term and permanent workforce. So the next slide, just to run through some of the benefits that we're expected to gain through the new agreement. I'm not going to run through all these in detail, because just to emphasise again, we will be sharing the slide pack. I think we're being asked that question, and the slides will be available to share. Through leveraging public sector volume and spend, we're expecting to achieve improved commercial benefits for government, and we're also looking to support some of government's policy aims, one of these being with regards to SMEs, whereby government aims to increase SME share of procurement spend, and also ensuring that government procurement drives economic growth and creates jobs. We'd also anticipate that access to specialist suppliers who have the ability to provide quality candidates with required skill sets, that we should see time to hire and attrition rates improved. And we also expect that improved time to hire and the stronger working relationships built with suppliers will contribute to generating a better candidate experience for potential workers going through the recruitment process. We know that as is, the candidate experience generally isn't always that positive in the public sector. There's a relatively long, slow process to follow, and a lack of attention to keeping candidates warm means we often lose quality candidates, and a poor experience can then sometimes defer candidates from applying for subsequent roles, not just within that particular department, but also in the public sector in general. And in the current market, where specialist skill sets are in such high demand and the public sector is struggling to compete with the private sector in terms of salaries, we may need to make sure we're doing all that we can to address the shortcomings that are within our gift to improve. And finally, having transparency on public sector spend on permanent recruitment, which is touched on by Clemmy, which we would be able to attain through having a centralised agreement in MI, would help inform future recruitment procurement strategies. So we're moving on now to the stakeholder feedback. So over the last couple of months, CCS has been speaking to some key stakeholders across government, trying to get an overview on how the perm recruitment process works within their particular organisation. And we've also been asking for the key attributes that they'd want from a new agreement in order it to fully meet their recruitment objectives and requirements. So there was quite a lot of feedback given, and the points raised we've really been able to summarise under the 4 headings there you can see on the slide. As I said, we're sharing the slide pack, so I won't read through all the comments. I'll just pick out a few of the key ones in each of those categories. So starting with price. Customers felt that they wanted to be able to ensure they're not only using a capable supplier, but that they're clearly able to also identify best value for money. And the feedback has indicated that in some of the existing agreements, both the pan-government available and with departments' own contracts, that the services in the pricing schedule are not necessarily fully aligned to current requirements. So new requirements, there's an element of best fit amongst the pricing schedule with what the actual current requirement is. And there's also been concern that suppliers' interpretation on individual service elements vary significantly. And this is creating an unfair playing field when trying to evaluate best value for money propositions. And this really needs to be addressed in the new agreement, making it much clearer. And following on with the theme of clarity over pricing and charges, customers have also requested that a new agreement would have clear position on certain fees, such as fixed term to perm, and also asked to give consideration as to whether or not it would be suitable to impose maximum agency fees. So moving on to the service category, feedback here summarised mainly that customers are very clear in wanting to have a clear and tangible supplier performance metrics in the new contract. They believe that having relevant and effective mechanisms to drive and measure supplier performance would see an increase in benefit in the outcome. And other key requests were the ability to have direct access to suppliers, i.e. not having an intermediary. Customers very vocal in recognising the value add obtained from developing effective working relationships with suppliers, and having direct access to the key suppliers is a key part of achieving this. And having the ability to develop these working relationships should hopefully enable suppliers to really understand an organisation's culture and role requirements that much better. And all of that hopefully then should have a knock-on effect in improving the quality of candidates or services provided to customers. So just moving on to the next column there, we've got ease of use really in the new contractual agreement. Customers were adamant on the requirement that any new agreement should be easy, flexible, and easy to call off from. They don't want onerous and complicated call-off agreements to complete, to use the framework. Simple and straightforward was pretty much the feedback from everybody that we spoke to. And another piece of feedback that was consistently provided was that they needed to have the provision to direct award to suppliers. That said, it's not intended that all requirements will be direct awards, but having the provision to do so when necessary was really a key attribute to having an agreement that would meet the user's needs. And this kind of links back to the previous point raised on price and the importance of having transparency and clarity on pricing so that customers can confidently do a direct award to capable suppliers that provide the best value for money services. And finally, under the last heading now, we've got supply. So access to a diverse range of capable suppliers was another of the most commonly received pieces of feedback. Many public sector customers have requirements across a wide range of job roles and grades, and as such, they really require the ability to contract with a diverse range of suppliers that are capable of meeting their diverse requirements. There was also the request that there were a sufficient number of providers available to meet role requirements. Customers didn't want to be put in the position where they had little choice and that there was only one supplier that could meet one of their particular needs, and they had no ability to select who they thought could provide best value for money. And finally, the last point really raised there was the recognition that there's increasing competition in the marketplace for candidates with certain skill sets, and traditional methods of attracting these candidates were no longer effective. And so they really want a mechanism to engage with suppliers and obtain market insights to help and shape their recruitment strategies going forward. So that really concludes the summary of the customer feedback that we've glinted up to now. And we're now going to move on to our first polling question.
Yeah, so we'll be very grateful if you could kindly provide a response to the polling questions, because the more feedback CCS gets, the more useful it is for the free market engagement. So the first question is, does the feedback on stakeholder requirements meet with your experience? Yes or no? Kindly click yes or no on the box. And we'll give you a couple of minutes to provide your responses. Okay. Seems the majority of you are saying yes at the moment, but we'll just give you a couple more seconds.
Yeah, give it a little bit longer. We're getting a really great response.
Yeah. Seems rather steady now, so
yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's really interesting to kind of see your responses on that, and obviously a great kind of aspect of the webinar to be able to get that immediate feedback. As I don't know if you can they see what's that? The results. Okay, here we go. So you should now be able to see the results, which are showing 89% in agreement that feedback that Joe's just gone through meets with your experience. So that's good to know that we've kind of we've picked up a lot of the key points there, and that kind of what we've picked up is reflective of your experience as well as a supply base. Obviously, there are some of you who are saying that isn't the case. So it would be really useful if particularly those of you who've said no, could just give us a little bit more feedback in the kind of chat function about what kind of other experiences you've picked up, and another kind of feedback that you might have that would be useful for us to kind of be aware of and to pick up on. So yes, please do send us any comments on that. Thank you. So we will move back into the presentation now, yes, I'm going to now in the next few slides take you through an overview of the proposed new model, and I think hopefully I've already seen some questions coming in about what's it going to cover and is it executive search and so on. I'm hopeful that we will be able to answer some of those in the next couple of slides. So you can now see in front of you the proposed kind of outline scope of the agreement. This is our thinking based on the engagement and research we've undertaken to date. I really want to kind of emphasise nothing is set in stone at this stage. This is our early thinking, and very much the reason for undertaking this pre-market engagement, as well as some of the customer engagement that we're doing at the moment, is to test our theories, to test our understanding, and to develop them in line with the feedback that we get. So your feedback will be listened to and will help us to shape the outcome. So firstly, in terms of customers, the agreement's intended to be available and open to organisations across both central government and the wider public sector. So that's government departments and their agencies and ALBs, as well as organisations in sectors such as education, health, emergency services, local government, third sectors, etc. That's not to say that this is going to be a comprehensive solution for all permanent recruitment requirements across those organisations. It's more to say that it will be open to all of those organisations. In terms of grades, the agreement will cover all grades or salary bands up to and including senior civil servant grades, and obviously their equivalents across the wider public sector. So it does, I saw some questions earlier on about whether it was going to cover executive search, and the answer is yes, it will. It will cover those levels. So on to the roles that we're looking to cover. The aim is for the agreement to focus on the key common role types across government and the public sector. So that's things like commercial, finance, HR, marketing, DDAT, executive. We're not at this point looking at the more specialist role types, but as I'll come on to in a minute, that may be part of a further phase of this agreement. So this is very much those common role types that would be engaged across the different organisations. And last of all, as mentioned earlier, the scope will cover recruitment services for both permanent and fixed term workers. So next slide just sets out the kind of phasing of this approach, because I think it's kind of important to emphasise that our strategy for permanent recruitment at this point is divided into two phases. Clearly there will be further, there'll be further activity later on as well, but at this point we're kind of planning on two phases of activity for this strategy. Our presentation today and the pre-market engagement that we're undertaking at this stage relates very much to the first phase. So first phase, phase one, aims to deliver a framework for 2 years with 2 12-month extension options, which would obviously take it to a potential total duration of 4 years. And that framework, the intention is to base that framework on a preferred supplier list, PSL model, segmented into a series of lots by role type. In terms of timescales, and we will go on to some more detailed information about timescales later, but the plan is to tender and award this agreement by the end of March 2018. So we're very much kind of moving forward at pace with this at the moment. In terms of phase 2, that will follow on from this stage, obviously, and will take us into consideration of some of the more mature delivery models for permanent recruitment, including things like managed service, RPO, etc. And specialist role types will be considered at that phase as well. So things like clinical roles, prison officers, etc. will be given consideration at that time. They will not be part of the scope for phase 1. At this early stage in our thinking, and obviously, you know, things are, you know, there is potential for things to change, but at this early stage, we anticipate that the commercial solution for phase 2 should be in place approximately 12 months after the award of the phase 1 framework. And of course, there will be lots of further engagement on that solution in due course as we get to that point. So moving on to the next slide, the proposed lotting structure. This hopefully again gives you all a bit more kind of a feel for what we're thinking. Again, this is relatively high level because we are at an early stage, but you know, kind of sets out the way that we're thinking that we will structure this agreement with a series of lots for different role types. Key things to pick out, you know, you can obviously see this, and as Joe's mentioned, you will get these slides after today. Just some key things to pick out from the slide. There are 9 proposed lots, 8 of which are by role type, so administrative, digital data and technology or DDAT, commercial, finance, HR, marketing, legal, and finally executive search, which is obviously the SES one. The final lot, lot 9, is a multi-role lot where suppliers would need to be able to fill across a number of different role types or categories in the lots 1 to 8. And the idea would be that would support some of the smaller central government and wider public sector organisations that might want to work with one supplier over a number of different role types. As mentioned previously, all grades and salary bandings are being covered. Lot 1 is aimed at the administrative or junior grades and lower salary bands, likely AA to HEO, for those of you who know about civil service grades, which I'm sure is a lot of you, and up to probably around £30,000 salary. Lots 2 to 6 are the middle grades, so SEO to grade 6 and equivalent, or salary bands over 30,000. And then lot 8 is the grade 6 to SES 3 lot, so the equivalent executive grade lot. And you'll note that there is some overlap there, so we're talking about covering grade 6 in lots 2 to 6 and also 2 to 7 and also in 8. The reason for that is that some of the feedback we've had from customers is that they want the flexibility to include grade 6 in some of their executive search activity, particularly in some of the niche role types. So that's our kind of thinking behind that. You can see in the description a high-level explanation of the kinds of roles that we see would be covered in each lot, but obviously we'll be building that up and providing a lot more detail of that in preparation for the tender stage. So the thinking at this stage is very much that suppliers will be able to tender for any number of lots across the agreement. So we're not intending to restrict you in terms of how many you could apply for. So an individual supplier agency could apply for just 1 lot, or could apply for several, or could apply for all 9. Obviously depending on your capability and your profile as a supplier. Oh, Bumi's just pointed out there's an error in one of the boxes. So on on row 6 for marketing roles, it says SEO up to grade 6 or over £330,000 salary. Little mistake there. That should obviously read £30,000 salary. Yeah, I think public sector are probably not going to be able to push it quite to that level. So apologies for that. We'll get that corrected before those slides are sent out. And finally, the expectation is that there will be multiple suppliers in each lot. So we're looking at potentially between 10 and 30 per lot, and it will depend on, you know, kind of the nature of the lot and the supply market for that particular lot. And we'll further explore that as part of our kind of next stage of supplier and customer engagement activities. So that will take us on to our next polling question. I'm quite excited now, having seen what came through on the last one. Bhumi,
yes, so the second question is, do you believe public sector's most common role requirements could be met with the proposed lotting structure? Yes or no? So again, do you believe the public sector's most common role requirements could be met with the proposed lotting structure? We're getting a consistent response again, like we did last time, but we're going to give it a couple more seconds to allow everyone to vote. Suppose we can agree that's more or less.
Should we just give it another second or two? Let it get up to 80% response rate. Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
So as that's shared, you should all now be able to see that. So 81% are saying yes, they do believe that the public sector's most common role requirements could be met by that lot structure, and 19% no. So again, it's great to see that kind of broadly this seems to be pitched about right in terms of the way that we've set out the kind of high level structure for the agreement. So that's kind of obviously very reassuring that we've kind of got that, you know, hopefully to a large extent right. Obviously, you know, there are some of you, 19%, a bit higher this time, saying that that no, that isn't quite right. So again, you know, really interested to understand kind of those of you particularly who've said no, what you think's missing, what what you think isn't quite hitting the mark there, and how we could do things, you know, differently to kind of, you know, achieve our customers' aims better. So please do provide us some responses.
So the third question is, would you be interested in tendering for the proposed opportunity? Yes or no? I'm going to give this a bit longer actually, because the more responses we get, the better. So they're all coming through.
Yeah, and I mean, we realise we've only given you, you know, a broad overview at this stage, but it's just to get us, you know, give us a kind of feel for the market interest level in this.
We'll give this up to at least, we should give it a good minute.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the key questions. And also, just to point out, there's a number of comments are coming through, and as we're reading them, a lot of questions still around the education sector, and some are around PSR, which is the contingent labour model. And this presentation is separate to those framework agreements. It's only in relation to permanent recruitment and not contingent labour, and also not the education sector. So a lot of you have voted. Yes, I think we can stop there.
Right. Okay, so again, you should be able to see the responses up on your screens as well. And we've got, again, I think that's the same as the last one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Good response. So 89% are saying yes, you would be interested in tendering for the proposed opportunity, and 11% no. So, you know, that's great to hear that there's a good level of interest, and sounds like we should have a really healthy competition for this agreement. So from our perspective, that's really good news.
So I've got the fourth polling question here. How many of these lots could your organisation service? So you've got 5 options: 1 or 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, or 8 to 9. Again, how many of these lots could your organisation service? 1, 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 8 to 9. And we're going to give this a minute as well. It's quite crucial we get a good number of responses on this question. Let's see.
Oh, the numbers are different on screen to what you've got there, Boomy. So I think there was, the ones that you've just read out were a previous presentation. So yes, please answer to what you can see on the screen, which I think is 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 7, or 8 to 9. Just give you a tiny bit more time.
Yeah.
Because we are quite interested in seeing what the kind of suppliers are most likely to be bidding. There's some I think I've just noticed a question, somebody saying which lots are we referring to. So that was back to the one of the previous slides. So I don't think we can probably get that back up, but just to kind of, so after the polling question we'll bring it back up, but just to kind of emphasize, there were 9 lots which basically covered. The first one was administrative grades, the second one was digital data and technology grades, the third one was commercial, the fourth one was finance, the fifth one was HR, the sixth was marketing, 7 legal, 8 executive search and selection, and 9 was multi-role, i.e. you'd be able to cover a number of those roles. So hopefully that just clarifies. Okay, should we close that now?
Yeah, we'll close that.
Okay, so good. Yeah, an interesting spread again there. So from some of you responding, 24% of you saying that you would be interested in tendering for 1 lot, through to 27%, 2 to 3, 15%, 4 to 5. 9%, 6 to 7, and then 25%, 8 to 9. So yeah, that's very interesting. Again, good for us to see that in terms of the supply base, there's a mix of ways that you would engage with this, and that obviously it sounds like we've got kind of on this call a good representation of some of the more niche providers versus kind of those of you who cover a whole host of roles. So yeah, that's great. We'll be probing that further, I think, in our further supplier engagement. Thank you. Right, so Jo, we'll hand over to you to bring the
Thank you. Okay, so the next slide we're going to go through now is just going to talk about the proposed timescales for the procurement. So starting off with the PIN release. So obviously I'm sure most of you dialing in today are aware that the PIN has been released. So that advises of CCS's intention to go to market for a perm recruitment framework, and crucially under the EU procurement regs that we have to work to, that enables us to signal to you, the supply market, that CCS is kind of open, ready for business, ready to engage with you and to test and develop the procurement strategy. So hence that's kicked off with what we're doing today. We have undertaken some initial customer engagement really to try and obtain a high level understanding of customers' requirements and their appetite for a new permanent recruitment framework. And we're going to be continuing this engagement over the rest of August and into September to further test and refine the strategy. So today's webinar has been the official launch of the market engagement, and in parallel to the customer engagement sessions, we're going to continue running further engagement with yourselves, the market, over August and September. So from the end of September through October and into November, indicative timelines showing that we will be drafting the procurement documentation in this period. And this activity will be led by CCS, but will feature key input from customer stakeholders to develop the specification, pricing schedules and evaluation criteria. So the OJU is currently scheduled to be released in November, close in December. and we'll be looking to go to market using the open procedure, and the ODU will be released for 30 days. We've allowed January and February for tender evaluation and consensus. Obviously, at this stage, we're trying to gauge the response that we'll have from the market, and that will impact the evaluation timescales. And we anticipate having award by March 2018. So as mentioned, these timescales are indicative, and as we move further through the engagement and the procurement process, specific dates will be confirmed and the timescales will be updated. So now we're going to move on to polling question number 5.
So the fifth question is, what are the most commonly adopted pricing models in your current contracts within public and private sector? Again, what are the most commonly adopted pricing models in your current contracts within the public and private sector? You've got 5 options there: fixed fee, percentage fee, activity-based fee, hybrid, or other. I think we're getting more consistent response.
Yeah.
But we're waiting for a few more votes, please, so we can get more of an accurate response. So we'll probably stop in about 10 seconds, so please continue voting. So far, it's looking like... There we go, the vote is closed.
Okay, so the voting's closed now. I think the results are available for you to see there on the screen. So we've got 14% fixed fee, and then an overwhelming majority of 68% percentage fee, 5% activity-based fee, 11% hybrid, and then 2% other. So we'd really welcome some insight into the other. If you could kindly share that with us, just so we can take that into consideration. Thank you. And then moving on to our last and final polling question.
Last one. So the last question is, would you consider tendering for an agreement with imposed agency fees or margins? Again, would you consider tendering for an agreement that has imposed agency fees or margin? Yes or no? I think we'll give that at least a minute, because that's quite crucial.
Yeah.
Please keep voting. We've got 72% of you so far. We're looking for at least 99% of votes. Okay. Seems a bit steady now.
Yeah.
So we'll just close that one.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. And I know, I've noticed in some of the comments people have said that it is perhaps a little difficult to respond to that, kind of without further information. Again, it is really about us getting a kind of initial temperature check. This is something that's being discussed with some customers in terms of kind of what some of the ideas that they've got of things that we might look at. So it was really just to kind of have an initial temperature check with you as kind of supply base about how that might kind of land with you. And clearly we will be discussing that in kind of more detail in kind of further engagement sessions that we're going to be running. So thank you for kind of giving us a bit of a feel for that. It looks it looks like there is some kind of feeling that could be something that we would be able to do. So yes, that's great. pass back to Jo to just finish it off.
Okay, so we're moving on now to the final slide in the presentation, questions and feedback. So we've said really continuously throughout the presentation, and just to emphasise again, that we can't really express or emphasise how much CCS does need and value your feedback, your comments and insight, as we really want to ensure that the new agreement is fit for purpose and aligned to the market. So we would really like you to advise whether, based on what's been presented today, I mean, we appreciate there's been questions coming in as we've gone along, but do you feel that there's something fundamental missing? If you could maybe give us your top 3 make or break points that we really need to consider into the agreement. Obviously, everything that's received back, we will review and it will be considered. We can't, commit that everything can be included, but certainly consideration would be given. So feedback, and you can use your chat boxes while the webinar's open, or please send to CCS's permanent recruitment email address. The details are there below. Or if there's anything confidential, you don't want to supply any information anonymously, then you can send that in to REC and they would forward that on to CCS anonymously. We touched earlier on the fact that we had very limited data and spend information, little insights into this sector across permanent recruitment market across public sector. So we've created an RFI, a request for information, and we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to complete the RFI. Some additional information from yourselves, and it would really help inform the approach that we take to the proposed framework. And the more data that we have, the more informed our decisions can be with regards to the structure of the agreement. REC will share the RFI along with today's presentation to all the members that registered for the event, and CCS will also have the presentation and the RFI available on our website at the address stated from tomorrow morning. We'd also suggest regularly checking the CCS website for updates on timelines, and we'll have details there of further market engagement sessions. So that really concludes the presentation that we had for you today, and we're going to now use some of the remaining time to answer some of the questions that have been coming in whilst the presentation's been ongoing.
Yeah, so I'll just take over at that point, because while Jo's been speaking, I've just been noting down a few of the things that are coming up on the chat section. I just want to kind of say, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but I just emphasise now, there are lots of questions coming through, which is great, and comments as well, which is really, fantastic and will help us. So thank you for engaging so actively with it. In terms of our ability to answer kind of all of these questions now, obviously, we've not got too much time, and there's an awful lot kind of on the screen. So what I think is probably sensible is that I picked out a few things as we've been going along, a few themes which seem to be coming out from your questions. Jo and I will answer those now, and then what we will do is we will take away the full feed, and we will seek to kind of prepare more considered responses to the questions kind of as a whole, and send those out via REC after today. So don't kind of worry if your question's not answered. We'll try to kind of get back to you on that. And as Jo's mentioned, we've given you now some other ways of engaging with us in terms of our web address, our email address, and so on. So you can obviously engage with us through those routes as well. So just to pick out a few things, I think somebody said there was a question on there which is quite easy to answer, which was, will the recording of this webinar be available? And yes, the answer is REC will be making this available after today. So yes, that will be there, so you can rewind and listen back on what we said. So that was that one. There was a question that came up I saw around facilities management and estates type roles, which is an interesting one because Joe and I have had some conversations about this, and it's something that we've kind of taken noted down to look at with our customers. So it's interesting that came up from you as suppliers as well. So just to say, we will be exploring that further with our customers and with suppliers. So you know, kind of we'll update you on that when we have some more information. There were quite a few questions at the beginning about whether executive recruitment and senior civil servant roles would be covered. I think I've answered that already, which is to say yes, they will be. There will be a lot to cover executive recruitment. There were also, I noticed, quite a few questions about specialist roles. So I saw quite a few questions asking, will teaching roles like head teacher and teacher roles, will clinical roles, doctors, nurses, etc. be covered? The answer to that is no, not in phase one. I think I did mention that earlier, but I'll just emphasise it again. In phase one, which is the framework that we are talking about now, which we will be tendering to award hopefully by March next year, we are talking only about common role types. So we won't be going into those specialist areas of teaching and clinical and, you know, kind of others of that nature. We will be considering those at phase two. So that's very much part of our kind of list of things that we will be considering at that stage. And as I mentioned before, there will be further supplier and market engagement at that stage. So just kind of watch this space about that really, and we'll be in touch via REC and other routes when we get to that stage. But that's not likely to be within the next, certainly I don't think we'll be engaging on that within the next kind of 4 to 6 months. So hopefully that answers that. There was a question about OJU release and where we will release the OJU and all that kind of stuff. So obviously it will be released via the official journal of the European Union, as is you know, kind of incumbent upon us. So if you are, as I'm sure lots of you will be, if you have trackers on that which kind of send you through relevant opportunities, you will get them via the official journal. It will also be published through Contracts Finder. It will be on the CCS website. Those of you who've expressed interest via Emptoris, if you haven't done already, go onto our website. There's a link to that through the pin. Please register and express interest through that route. We have the ability to send out kind of reminders and so on through that route as well. So it's worth registering, because then you know, you'll get a kind of notification. So there's lots of routes, but I mean, you know, and also the other route, clearly we can send something out through REC, so we can send a kind of notice out when that happens through REC as well. Joe, was there anything that you picked up?
I picked up a comment about mandation. Will this framework be mandated? No is the answer. It won't be mandated. That's not to say it's not within a gift of a department to maybe mandate with use within their own organisation, but the framework will not be mandated for use. The approach that we're taking very much is that we want to work with our stakeholders across government to ensure that the new agreement would meet all their requirements and their needs, and that stakeholders will choose to use the framework rather than having the mandate label attached to it. So that covers off that question. Also being asked about recruitment services that would be included within the specification. That's still very much in the development phase, and as we touched on, we've got further customer workshops this week and over the coming month or so to kind of draw that out, what those requirements are in services. So that will be communicated back amongst yourselves as we develop our strategy around that area. And I think the most popular one I saw coming through was on the nature of further engagements sessions with the market. So the intention is to have a number of additional sessions, group and a limited number of one-to-ones, where we can have conversations with yourselves to, as we develop our understanding on the requirements with customers, that we can share these and test those ideas with yourselves, the market. So we'll be communicating dates of those in due course, as I mentioned, if you could keep your eye on the website. I'm also mindful as well that the size of the supplier market in this area, that we may be limited on the number of attendees we can meet with, but certainly we will be advertising the opportunities that we have, and we hope to see as many of you as possible.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, just to add to that, in terms of, as Joe said, we will try to engage with as many as we can, but there will be limitations to that. We are already talking to REC about a follow-up session to this, you know, kind of at the other end of our, you know, we're going to be taking a few weeks now to talk to customers and suppliers and so on. But once we've kind of got to the end of that and we've got some further insights to kind of pass on, we're talking to REC about a further potential webinar where we can actually deliver that to a wider audience. So there will be that opportunity. And one of the things, and again, I saw this in some of the questions, so hopefully this will answer some of your questions that you're having. One of the things that we will do as part of that is talk through the tender itself. You know, clearly we won't be able to talk through kind of individual questions and so on, but we'll be able to talk through the tender process, how that works, and hopefully give you some guidance, particularly to some of you who may be less, you know, kind of used to tendering, giving some high level information about how that process works and how to, you know, kind of get the best out of it. So yes, there's more information to come on that.
So that's the end of the webinar. Thank you so much, Clemmy and Joe, for the webinar today, and we hope you found it very useful. Again, the slides are going to be sent out to all of you, and you've also got the email address if you've got any specific comments or feedback. Thank you all again, and have a lovely day.